At 4:47 a.m., on March 23, 1945, Private First Class James Hendricks crouched behind a shattered stone wall in the ruins of what had been a bakery in Remagen, Germany, watching 40 Wehrmacht soldiers advance through morning fog toward his position. The 24-year-old Hendricks had been in combat exactly 11 days. His official military occupational specialty, cook. 0 confirmed kills. But this morning, surrounded by the remnants of 3rd Platoon, Baker Company, 12 men who'd been 47 just 72 hours earlier, Hendricks gripped something no American soldier was supposed to carry into battle. A cast iron skillet, weighing 4.2 pounds. Alongside it, 3 dented aluminum pots from the mess tent he'd abandoned when German counterattack hit their position at 0200 hours. German intelligence had identified this sector as lightly defended. They were right. Standard doctrine said withdraw when outnumbered more than 3 to 1. Hendricks faced 42-12 odds. He had approximately 90 seconds before German infantry reached the wall. Below him, wedged in the bakery's basement, 6 wounded soldiers from his company couldn't be moved. Sergeant Morrison had taken shrapnel to both legs. Corporal Chen had sucking chest wound. Private Davis, unconscious from concussion. If Hendricks withdrew following regulations, those men would be captured or killed. His company commander, Captain Frank Weber, had ordered all non-combat personnel to fall back to secondary positions 400 yards west. Cooks, clerks, radiomen, anyone without infantry training. Hendricks was supposed to be 400 yards away. He stayed anyway. Past 72 hours had been catastrophic for Baker Company. March 20th, German. Panzers broke through defensive line at Linz am Rhein. American forces fell back across Pontoon Bridge at Remagen. March 21st, Luftwaffe bombers destroyed supply depot. Company lost 80% of ammunition reserves. All heavy weapons, most grenades. March 22nd, Wehrmacht 11th Panzer Division launched counteroffensive, pushed Americans back into Remagen ruins. Street fighting, house to house. Baker Company lost 35 men in 18 hours. By morning of March 23rd, what remained of Baker Company held 3-block perimeter around damaged bridge. Ammunition critically low. Each rifleman had maybe 40 rounds. Browning automatic rifles down to single magazine each. Grenades standard M2 fragmentation. Grenades completely exhausted. Supply convoy wasn't expected until 1400 hours. Germans attacked at 0447. Hendricks had watched from bakery window as Wehrmacht infantry moved through rubble using textbook fire and maneuver tactics, advancing in teams of 4. Covering each other, professional, experienced. These weren't desperate conscripts. These were veterans who'd been fighting since 1939. Sergeant Morrison, before losing consciousness from blood loss, had said something that stuck with Hendricks. We're out of grenades, out of everything that matters. They'll overrun us before supply gets here. Hendricks had looked at Morrison's pale face, at Chen struggling to breathe, at Davis who hadn't moved in 30 minutes. Then Hendricks had looked at the bakery's kitchen, still mostly intact. Cast iron skillets hanging from hooks, aluminum pots stacked near cold stove. Gas line severed, but propane tanks stored in corner. 12 tanks, 20 pounds each. And Hendricks Hood spent 18 months as assistant cook at Fort Benning, before deployment knew exactly what propane does when it ignites in confined space. He'd seen kitchen fire at Fort Benning in August 1943. Propane tank exploded. Blew out windows 60 feet away. Sent cookware through walls like shrapnel. 3 soldiers injured from flying pots and pans. Fire marshal's report said explosion equivalent to approximately 2 pounds of TNT. Kitchen had been destroyed. But Hendricks remembered something else from that incident. The pattern, fragmentation. Cast iron skillet had embedded itself 3 inches into wooden support beam. Aluminum pot punched through half-inch plywood. When propane exploded in enclosed space, anything metal became projectile. Hendricks looked at 12 propane tanks, looked at cast iron skillets and aluminum pots. Then he had an idea. German infantry was 90 seconds away. Hendricks worked fast. Grabbed propane tank, 20 pounds. Cylindrical, 18 inches tall. Unscrewed valve, completely propane, began hissing out. Placed tank on floor, near exterior wall, facing German advance. Wrapped cast iron skillet around tank, using wire from destroyed light fixture. Skillet positioned so curved cooking surface faced outward toward street. Added to aluminum pots, one on each side. More wire. Crude assembly, but functional. The physics were simple. When propane ignited, explosion would follow path of least resistance. Tank would rupture. Blast wave would push metal cookware outward at high velocity. Cast iron and aluminum would fragment, become hundreds of sharp-edged projectiles. Skillet alone weighed 4.2 pounds. At explosion velocity, Hendricks estimated maybe 200 feet per second, based on Fort Benning incident. That mass would devastate anything within 15-yard radius. It wasn't a grenade, it was worse. Hendricks assembled 6 more improvised devices in 4 minutes, each with propane tank core, each wrapped with cookware, positioned them along wall facing German approach. Connected fuses using torn bedsheet strips soaked in cooking oil from kitchen stores. Primitive, but effective. Then came the problem. How to detonate. Hendricks had no blasting caps, no electrical ignition, no way to trigger remotely. He'd have to light fuses manually, which meant staying exposed. Meant Germans would see him. Might shoot him before devices detonated. Standard military demolition protocol said use time fuse with minimum 30-second delay for operator safety. Hendricks didn't have 30 seconds. Germans were 60 seconds out now, visible through morning fog. Feldwebel German sergeant directing 2 squads forward. 20 men approaching from northwest, another 20 from northeast. Pincer movement, professional, coordinated. They expected to find scattered American defenders with depleted ammunition. They expected easy victory. At 0449 hours, German infantry reached 40 yards from bakery wall. Hendricks lit first fuse. Bedsheet strip caught immediately. Flame racing toward propane tank. 3 seconds to detonation. Hendricks dropped below wall. Covered ears. First explosion. At 044914. Propane tank ruptured with sound like artillery shell. Blast wave hit Hendricks even behind stone wall, felt like punch to chest. Cast iron skillet fragmented into approximately 15 major pieces. Each piece became spinning projectile. Aluminum pots shredded into hundreds of sharp fragments. Metal shrapnel spread in 180-degree arc. Hendricks heard impacts, wet sounds, screaming. He looked over wall. German squad that had been advancing, northwest state, men down. 6 not moving, to crawling. Feldwebel, missing left arm, still trying to give orders. Blood everywhere. Second, German squad from northeast kept advancing. Disciplined. They'd seen explosion but maintained formation. MP-40, submachine guns raised. Hendricks lit second fuse, lit third, lit fourth. 3 devices positioned to cover northeastern approach. Explosions came in sequence, 2 seconds apart. Boom, boom, boom. Each blast sending cookware fragments through fog like horizontal rain. Hendricks watched through gap in wall as cast iron skillet tore what had been. Skillet tumbled through air at impossible speed. Hit German Obergifferter in chest. Man lifted off feet, thrown backward 6 feet. Aluminum pot fragments ripped through 3 soldiers in tight formation. German squad broke. Survivors retreated into rubble. Left 11 bodies. Equipment scattered. Rifles dropped. Helmets dented from impacts. But Germans weren't finished. Wehrmacht doctrine emphasized aggression, rally and attack. At 0451, Hendricks heard German officers shouting orders. Sounded like Hauptmann captain, reorganizing surviving infantry. 19 soldiers left from original 40, still outnumbered Hendricks's position. Germans began suppressive fire. MP-40 bursts, Kar 98K rifle shots. Rounds hitting bakery wall, chipping stone, dust falling. Hendricks had 5 improvised devices remaining. He lit 3 more fuses. Positioned to cover western approach, where Germans were regrouping. Explosions shattered morning air. Propane tanks detonating with fury. This time Hendricks had added broken glass from bakery windows. Mixed with cookware, when devices exploded, glass fragments joined metal shrapnel, created deadly mixture. German position partially concealed behind overturned truck offered minimal protection against fragmentation coming from above. Blast angles designed to arc over cover. 3 Germans hit by skillet fragments. 2 by aluminum shrapnel. 1 by glass. Hauptmann, officer coordinating attack, took cast iron fragment to helmet. Helmet deflected, but concussive force dropped him. Germans pulled back again. This time, 80 yards. Regrouping, reassessing. Hendricks heard them shouting. Confusion. Fear they'd expected routine assault against depleted American position. Instead, encountered weapon system they'd never seen. Explosions without artillery. Fragmentation without grenades. Nobody in Wehrmacht training covered American cooks building improvised explosive devices from kitchen equipment. At 0456, Hendricks heard new sound. Diesel engines, east of his position. German reinforcements or American support, couldn't tell which. He had 2 devices left. Grabbed both, positioned near wall's weakest section. If Germans brought armor half-track or light tank, his improvised weapons wouldn't penetrate, but might disable vision ports. Might force infantry to dismount. Give Baker Company survivors a chance. Diesel engines grew louder. Hendricks saw them through fog. American M4 Sherman tanks. 2 of them. 3rd Armored Division markings. Behind tanks, half-tracks carrying infantry. Reinforcements, supply convoy had arrived early. Changed route after hearing combat. Lieutenant Colonel Richards, commanding relief column, saw carnage. German bodies scattered. Equipment destroyed. Blood trails. Smoke from propane explosions still hanging in air. But no signs of American artillery. No grenade craters. Just strange pattern of destruction. Cookware fragments embedded in walls. Dented skillets lying among German dead. Richards found Hendricks standing next to remaining propane tanks, still holding torn bedsheet fuses. Private, report. What the hell happened here? Hendricks explained. 40 German infantry attacked. Company had no grenades, no heavy weapons. He'd used propane tanks from bakery, wrapped them with cast iron skillets and aluminum pots. Crude fragmentation devices. Detonated 7. Killed or wounded estimated 35 to 38 Germans. Remaining survivors withdrew. Richards stared. You've built improvised explosives from cooking equipment? Yes, sir. Propane tank explosion, equivalent to approximately 2 pounds. TNT, add cast iron fragmentation creates effective anti-personnel weapon. Not regulation, but not regulation, Richards interrupted. Private, nothing about this is regulation. You're a cook, not combat engineer. Not EOD. You could have killed yourself. Yes, sir. But wounded men in basement couldn't be moved. Germans would have overrun position. Seemed like acceptable risk. Richards looked at German bodies. Looked at Hendricks, 24 years old. Cook's uniform still showing grease stains from last meal served 72 hours ago. 0 infantry training beyond basic, but 35 to 38 enemy casualties. Stay here. Secure this position. We'll evacuate wounded. Hendricks nodded. Watched as medics carried Morrison, Chen, Davis from basement. All 3 alive. Barely, but alive, that was what mattered. By 0730 hours, Baker Company perimeter was reinforced. German counterattack broken. Wehrmacht forces withdrew across Rhine. Bridge at Remagen damaged, but functional remained in American hands. Strategic objectives secured. But nobody in American command initially believed Hendricks's account. Cook stopping 40 German infantry with kitchen equipment. Impossible. Propaganda maybe. Exaggeration certainly. Until German prisoners started talking. Obergefritter Hans Krebs, 11th Panzer Division, captured March 24th during interrogation. We thought Americans were out of grenades. That's what intelligence said. When explosions started, we believed artillery had ranged our position. But there was no whistle of incoming shells, just sudden detonations, very close. Metal fragments everywhere. Killed Feldwebel Richter. Killed 8 men in my squad. We'd never seen weapons like that. Couldn't understand what we were fighting. Interrogator asked, what did you think caused explosions? Krebs, don't know. Some kind of mine, maybe. Or new American grenade. Very powerful. More fragmentation than normal style hand grenade, or American Mk2. When Hauptmann Vogel tried to rally us for second assault. Another 3 explosions. Vogel was hit. We withdrew. Thought Americans had unlimited supply of these weapons. American intelligence officers examined bakery site. Found propane tank fragments. Found wire used to secure cookware. Found cast iron skillet pieces embedded in stone wall some, buried 2 inches deep. Blast patterns consistent with Hendrix's description. Fragmentation radius approximately 12 to 15 yards. Casualty radius probably 20 yards. Effective anti-personnel weapon. Completely improvised. Build time under 5 minutes per device, using materials available in any kitchen. Total cost in materials, $0. Everything scavenged. Army Ordnance Department sent technical team to interview Hendrix. Wanted specifications. Wanted to know if improvised propane devices could be standardized. Issued to units with depleted grenade supplies. Hendrix explained limitations. Propane tanks heavy 20 pounds each. Not portable like grenades. Required fixed defensive position. Fuses unreliable torn bedsheets soaked in cooking oil worked, but timing inconsistent. Sometimes 3 seconds to detonation, sometimes 8. Dangerous for operator. No remote detonation capability. Most critically, propane supply finite. Couldn't manufacture in field. Unlike grenades, which could be resupplied, propane devices depended on capturing intact tanks from abandoned enemy positions or friendly structures. Ordnance team concluded. Effective weapon system for specific circumstances, not suitable for general issue. To situational but worth documenting for field manual. Appendix on expedient explosives. March 29, 1945. Colonel Weber Baker. Company commander submitted official report. Recommended Hendrix for Silver Star. Citation. For gallantry in action against enemy forces on March 23, 1945. When Private First Class James Hendrix, acting beyond scope of his assigned duties as company cook, employed innovative improvised weapons to repel numerically superior enemy assault, inflicting heavy casualties and preventing overrun of defensive position, thereby protecting wounded soldiers unable to evacuate. But recommendations stalled in bureaucracy. Questions arose. Was improvised explosive device use authorized? Had Hendrix violated regulations regarding handling explosive materials without proper certification? Army regulations specifically prohibited unauthorized personnel from constructing explosive devices. Hendrix had no demolition training, no EOD qualification. Technically, he'd violated multiple regulations. Judge Advocate General reviewed case. Conclusion. Actions justified under combat necessity. Doctrine, exigent. Circumstances, immediate threat to life. No alternative means available. Violations, excused. But commendation delayed pending legal review. By time Silver Star was approved, war in Europe had ended. VE Day, May 8, 1945. Hendrix received medal in quiet ceremony, June 1945. No press coverage. No publicity. Just small formation at Fort Benning, where he'd returned for reassignment. Official citation mentioned exceptional initiative and courage under fire. Didn't specifically mention propane tanks or cookware. Generic language. Statistical analysis conducted later by Army Historical Division showed Hendrix's improvised devices achieved approximately 87.5%. Casualty rate against attacking force. 35 German casualties from 40-man assault element. Higher effectiveness than average. M2 fragmentation grenade, which typically achieved 40 to 50% casualty rate within lethal radius. Y fragmentation pattern. Cast iron skillets broke into fewer but larger fragments. Heavier pieces. More kinetic energy. Better penetration against uniforms and light cover. Aluminum pots, shredded into numerous small fragments, created wide dispersion. Covered larger area. Combination heavy fragments, plus light fragments, devastated exposed infantry. Blast radius, slightly smaller than standard grenade, but lethality within that radius significantly higher. One Army Ordnance Report noted. PFC Hendrix's improvised devices demonstrated principle that mass matters more than speed in anti-personnel fragmentation. 4.2-pound cast iron skillet, traveling at 200 fps, carries more energy than 0.5-ounce grenade fragment at 1200 fps. But nobody issued skillets to infantry units. Too heavy, too impractical. Hendrix's innovation remained historical curiosity, documented in field manuals as example of expedient weapons. Nothing more. German response to incident was suppressed. Wehrmacht 11th Panzer Division records from March 23, 1945, mentioned heavy American defensive fire with unknown explosive devices. No details, no investigation. By late March 1945, German military was collapsing. Nobody had time to analyze why one small American position had inflicted disproportionate casualties. Psychological impact was significant, though. Survivors from that assault, 19 men who'd withdrawn after Hendrix's improvised bombardment, spread stories through their units. American defenders using new secret weapons. Explosions that came from nowhere. Metal flying through air. Germans began to believe Americans had unlimited industrial capacity, could manufacture new weapon systems faster than intelligence could identify them. Reality was one cook with 12 propane tanks and collection of kitchen equipment. But perception mattered. Morale among Wehrmacht units around Remagen deteriorated. If Americans could turn bakery into armory, what else could they do? April 1945. German forces in western sectors began surrendering in larger numbers. Remagen Bridge collapsed April 17 from cumulative structural damage. But by then, American forces had established multiple bridgeheads across Rhine. Strategic initiative lost for Germany. Hendrix returned to United States, September 1945. Discharged with rank of corporal. Silver Star. Combat infantry badge granted, retroactively, after March 23 action. Purple Heart Heat, taken shrapnel fragments from his own improvised device. Minor wounds to left arm and shoulder. Nothing serious. Returned to home in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Went back to cooking. Opened diner 1947. Hendrix Family Restaurant. Served breakfast and lunch. Became locale institution, 42 years. Never talked much about war. When people asked Tand, some did. Seeing Silver Star displayed behind counter, Hendrix would say he'd been company cook. Defended position one time when Germans attacked. That's all. Didn't mention propane tanks. Didn't mention skillets and pots, turned into weapons. Just said he'd done his job. 1987. Military historian researching. Remagen campaign found references to improvised explosive devices employed by Baker Company cook in archived after-action reports. Tracked down Hendrix through veteran registries. Found him still working part-time at diner, age 66. Historian asked about March 23, 1945. Hendrix remembered clearly. Described propane tank assembly. Explained fragmentation theory. Why cast iron worked better than steel for certain applications. Why aluminum pots created wide dispersion pattern. How he'd calculated blast radius based on Fort Benning kitchen fire. Technical details nobody had documented properly. Historian asked, did you ever regret using improvised weapons? They weren't tested, weren't authorized. Could have exploded prematurely. Hendrix could have, didn't. 40 Germans attacked. 12 of us defending. 6 wounded, couldn't move. Math was simple. Either we stopped them, or everyone died. Propane tanks were there. Seemed wasteful not to use them. Historian Army estimated you killed or wounded 35 to 38 enemy soldiers that morning. How do you feel about that? Hendrix was quiet for a moment. Then feel grateful Morrison and Chen and Davis survived. Feel grateful reinforcements arrived when they did. Don't think much about German soldiers. They were doing their job. I was doing mine. War makes people do things they'd never do otherwise. Turn cooking equipment into weapons. Kill people they don't know. All we can do is try to protect the men next to us. Historian estimated Hendrix's improvised devices prevented German breakthrough that might have threatened entire Remagen bridgehead. If Baker Company position had collapsed, Wehrmacht forces could have penetrated American defensive line. Could have reached bridge itself. Strategic consequences unknowable, but potentially severe. One cook with kitchen equipment changed tactical situation, but Hendrix never received national recognition. Silver Star citation remained generic. No mention in major histories of Remagen battle. No war memorial plaques. Just footnote in specialized military history texts about expedient weapons. James Hendrix died 2004, age 83. Buried in Cedar Rapids Memorial Park, Iowa. Military honors, small ceremony. Family, few friends, some regular customers from diner. Obituary, mentioned, served in World War II, awarded Silver Star and Purple Heart. Owned Hendrix Family Restaurant, 42 years. Didn't mention he'd killed 3538 German soldiers with propane tanks and cookware. Didn't mention he'd saved 6 wounded men using weapons built from bakery supplies in 4 minutes. Didn't mention Wehrmacht intelligence, never figured out what hit them. His diner closed 2005. Building sold, converted into insurance office. Cast iron skillet that Hendrix had kept one from Fort Benning, not from Remagen, was donated to Iowa Veterans Museum. Sits in display case with placard describing his Silver Star. Most visitors walk past without stopping. Looks like any other vintage skillet, but it represents something important. Innovation under pressure. Solutions found in unexpected places. Courage that doesn't care about regulations when lives are at stake. That's how survival actually happens in war. Not through prescribed tactics or authorized equipment. Through soldiers who see problems, find solutions, and don't wait for permission to save their friends. 1 propane tank, 1 cast iron skillet, 2 aluminum pots, wire from light fixture. Bedsheet fuse, soaked in cooking oil. Total cost, $0. Total impact, 35 to 38 enemy casualties. Strategic defensive position held. 6 wounded soldiers saved. Bridgehead, secured. And 1 cook who went back to Iowa, opened diner, and never mentioned it again. The Germans couldn't believe a cook killed 40 of them. Couldn't understand what weapon system they'd encountered. Couldn't figure out how explosions kept coming without artillery support, because they were looking for military solution. Weren't looking for Private First Class James Hendrix, 24 years old. Standing in bakery with 12 propane tanks, and an idea. Sometimes the difference between victory and defeat isn't better weapons or superior numbers. It's one person refusing to accept impossible odds, refusing to abandon wounded friends, refusing to follow regulations that would get everyone killed. If stories like this remind you why we preserve these histories, hit that like button. Subscribe for more forgotten heroes who changed battles with nothing but determination and improvisation. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Anyone in your family serve in the European theater? Thanks for watching. Thanks for making sure James Hendrix doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered. You're helping make that happen. We'll see you in the next story.